people need to sit together and decide on a common standard. That is one of the things we're lacking in Europe, to be honest. Technology is there today. We can solve it. The problem is that who will benefit from the technology? That is the last step now, I think, to make this happen, is to realize the business model for it.
Well, John, here we go again. Another podcast. How do you feel about it?
Excited.
Excited?
Excited to be here, and also excited to be at EVS 38.
Man, I always wonder who has these ideas to put me in a podcast with people, but it seems that some people enjoy it. So we're back, EVS 38. We're in Gothenburg.
Yeah.
We're just Sweden.
Home turf.
Home turf.
Yeah.
At the same time, for me, it's Zaptec town, because everywhere I went last night, it says Zaptec chargers. How is it for you when you see chargers installed in the wild?
You know, man, I'm proud, I would say. And that reminds me of the work we have done in Sweden the last 4 years. I like to think about it. When we do new products in Zaptec now, we're re-engineering them from the ground up. And it's also the way we built the business in Sweden in some way, that we started from the ground up. So when we started in Sweden, it was about making sure that the installers liking our product.
Yeah. Is
it simple to work with? Is it easy to install? And one of the most important things is the support.
Yeah,
did he have someone to call? So I would say it reminds me of the good things we have done in Sweden the last 4 years.
So you just mentioned support. When we did the podcast, The Power to Drive, got a bit of backlash internally. I think I called out some other companies, but I do believe that the aspect of software is extremely underrated. Hardware is underrated, but the support kind of binds it together, right? You can make the best product, but no one's perfect. There's always going to be something that doesn't work. So if you look at support, and you look at product rollout and installers, how hard is it to please installers from your perspective?
To be honest, not that hard. It's all about taking the time and have the resources to serve the ones that are trying to install our chargers.
Yeah.
So I would say that you need to have the resources in place, but you also need to work proactive so you don't have that many problems with your chargers. Yeah. Because even though you have resources, but you're launching products that maybe are not working that well, you have a hard time kind of reaching those numbers in terms of SLA and answer all the calls and answer all the tickets. But it's also about the right competence at support. The support in Sweden consists of installers. Originally, they are installers. They have worked at installer companies as project leaders, or they have been in the service industry, providing service for other type of businesses that are a bit technical. So it's also about having the right competence in place. They understand that time is of essence. So when someone calls, they are most likely on site. You need to have competence to answer the questions quickly. In this business, time is also money. And that connects also to the kind of setup we have in the start here with the installation flow in Sweden, that it was so easy to install the products. Yeah. For an installer to be able to count the hours they need to have to install a Zaptec, but also provide service for a Zaptec charger. Those two factors was kind of the keys for us to be really successful.
Becoming market leader in Sweden, take away the service aspect. What, in your opinion, are one or two other things that set Zaptec apart and what became one of the key drivers for that position you now have in the Swedish market?
I would say that the team in Sweden is one of the key factors. We didn't work as a manufacturer and a client relationship. We worked as partners. When we started, we had almost 300 installers that were buying directly from us. And when the growth started, we kind of pretty quickly realized that this is not sustainable, because then we need a sales team that is maybe 50 people or something. So we tried to kind of collect all the volume into different partners and then work with them to be able to grow together. So the most important thing for us is, of course, for us to grow, but when we grow, the partners grow as well. So that has been a super important step for us, that we have fewer partners, but bigger partnerships.
Yeah. What would you recommend to other companies wanting to become a market leader, no matter if EV charging or any other space? And you start from scratch. I mean, the history of Sweden and Zaptec in Sweden, it's not a decade-long story. We haven't been here for 10, 20, 30 years. What do you see as essential?
Regarding time, I actually think a bit different than you. I think for this industry that we have been in for 4 years now, or almost 5 years, to set that in perspective to another business that equals maybe 10 years because this business travels so fast.
100% agree.
So I would say let it take time. And what you need to do is to understand your strengths. And for us, it was actually the installation journey, the support. And because myself, I'm from the car industry, and cars are pretty homogeneous as a product. And it's almost the same as chargers, almost the same. So what you need to find is the USPs for your partners to be able to realize their business potential with your product. So you need to understand what is the hassles for the customers that we are approaching in our industry. And the hassle was that it was very technical with chargers in Sweden 5 years ago. It was pretty complex to install. It was a lot of things you needed to do with the installation. It was not digital. So that was one of the big problems that we solved. When you realize that this is the thing we solve in the market, build on that one.
Yeah.
So approach your partners with that kind of setup that we are solving your problems. And when we're there, they will recommend your product to everyone that is asking for a charger.
Yeah.
So I think that's, let it take time, and you need to be very specific about your own strengths.
Yeah. We're both on the same mission within Zaptec, but facing very different obstacles, right?
Yeah.
So if I come to Sweden or Norway, it's almost like a fever dream compared to what's going on in the rest of Europe, where, yes, there is, of course, a positive direction that's been establishing itself, but we're far from the adoption we have here in Sweden and in Norway. But from a Swede's perspective, what is your take on the EV landscape in Sweden compared to, let's say, the rest of Europe?
For the last 10 years, we have had good growth of EV cars, and we did exactly as Norway did. We subsidized the cars. And that was one of the main factors that we actually had that high of an adoption compared to the rest of Europe. I think also one of the things that is a key factor for Sweden is that you have car manufacturers here. Volvo Cars, for example. They kind of drive the market here. And if they want to go with EV cars, most likely a lot of governmental decisions will push towards electrification. One other thing that I think is very significantly for Sweden is the energy landscape, and that you maybe see your car as a resource as well. People in Sweden tends to be pretty progressive. You're looking for new technology. We are pretty far ahead on integration side. We have a lot of exciting companies in Sweden that try to solve a lot of problems. So when you choose the EV car, I think it's not always that you just want the EV car. You want to be a part of a big movement. Yeah. That is the new energy ecosystem. So I think that is also one of the things that make Sweden so high in EV adoption as well.
I think it's extremely interesting when you speak to people outside of our bubble. I think it's fair to say we all live in our own energy or EV charging bubbles. Always mesmerized coming from or living in a country with 0.6% meter smart meter rollout.
Yeah.
That the average Swedish person has knowledge over what dynamic tariffs are and that you can save money on those aspects.
Yeah.
But you know, we spoke about this before. Where a few years from now does the charger fit in? Is it an enabler to charge? Is it a central part of an ecosystem? And going into that direction a bit, you will, of course, start with installers. And then you added partners to fulfill them. You added energy companies. How do you go from a long list of needs where, let's say, down from the installer up to a big utility, they say, we want you to do this, we want to have this software feature. How are you able to tick off these needs in the Swedish market to basically make not everyone, but most, I guess, happy?
If you have the ambition to solve everything, I think you will like self-die.
I agree.
So what you need to realize is that we are so good at hardware and software connected to our hardware. But you have a lot of good players in the market that are super good at third-party solutions like payments, solar integration, flexibility market. What is important is that you need to look at the expert competence that other companies have and open up for them to integrate with our products. In general, in Sweden today, you will most likely have a smart home device. You will most likely have a smart energy company that are doing the tariffs for you or charging at the right hours, for example. So it's not necessary for us to tick all the boxes by ourselves, but we need to tick the boxes through third-party integrators and other companies and work closely with them.
I would argue that every company in the sector wanting to become the Apple of EV charging is going to fail. Yeah. And I think there's a risk that as soon as vehicle to grid and other technologies roll out, individual companies just collaborating with each other rather than establishing one standard for everyone, that will ultimately not make it be a mass rollout product. Yeah. And, it might be one OEM or one energy company, but it seems that on the charging side, we're all kind of ready. And what I noticed as well is many installers asked the question, when is V2G and all these things coming? But ultimately, it's down to regulations. And we could argue over who is the biggest or who has the biggest pull factor in that sense. But you spoke about service before. How would you define good support? Do you see, or what is the level of good service that you guys specifically in Sweden say this is good enough?
I think you could translate the same thing as we do in sales that was defined by partnerships. Yeah, is the same thing in support. We are not customer service in that sense that it is a call center. You call and someone is creating a ticket, and then you are kind of forwarding that ticket to another line, and it takes 48 hours before the ticket is solved. Is all about partnerships in support as well, and that you can actually relate to the customer that are calling in. What do they have? What's the problem? What is the impact of the installer's problem? How can we solve it fast? So if I were to summarize that in one word, I think it's interest. So the interest of helping the customer and the interest of realizing what kind of problems they have, because that is also how we build for the future. So if you're interested in the installer's problems, we can easily be more proactive, and we can realize that, man, this is a problem that occurs maybe once a week. How can we build it away? But if you're not interested, you will not take those decisions. Then you will end up with the same problems over and over again, and that will create a lot of frustration. So one word, I think it is interest.
There's this interview question that some consulting companies do, which is, if you had to pick one, what is more important, a perfect product or a great service? And it's a trick question because no product's ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be something. And great service alone, of course, is great, but it doesn't solve everything. I think a lot of companies see the support aspect as a commodity. It's something you have to offer it. And, first they buy, and if there's something, it will be fine. But it can escalate extremely quick, especially if you grow a lot. Yeah. Keeping a support system running on a few hundred chargers or a few thousand is different than dozens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And I think that sets us apart extremely because we invest a lot in that department. We do it locally as well, which I think adds a nice touch as well. Yeah. But if you look at support and you look at partnerships and interest, looking again from the outside in, what's going on in Germany. We speak too much probably. But you look at these markets and you spoke about energy and kind of seeing it as an ecosystem. So what do you see the next few years to be defining in Sweden? What do you see as your vision for EV charging in Sweden, so to speak?
What I think is that EV charging needs to be more about commodity. It's not necessarily the EV cars that will provide the growth for chargers. I think chargers by itself could be a product that is bought without the car. Because the only thing we know for sure is that 2030 or 2035, there will be almost only electric cars. So to be prepared for those kind of resources that are in the future and to be a part of the total energy system, the ecosystem we have with energy, is that you need to have the charger, because the charger is an enabler from the car to the grid to the home. So for Sweden, I would say that energy companies and third-party integrators and our own software, that those will be the enablers to be a part of the bigger energy ecosystem and provide more value just than charge your car.
Do you think that will be because people have to sit together at a table and decide on we're going to go for one standard or we're going to do this together? Or do you think things should just be open standards, so to speak?
I would say that people need to sit together and decide on a common standard. That is one of the things we're lacking in Europe, to be honest. I think we talked about this 10 or 20 times maybe, that we need to have a unified standard for how we work with EV charging. And also if you talk about the standards for V2G and so forth, that needs to be kind of standardized to be able for everyone to work with it. And also, I think to have a sustainable business model, because, the technology is there today. We can solve it. The problem is that who will benefit from the technology? It's like inventing the iPhone before no one knew where to use it for, like emailing, web browsing, music. It's always a start for everything, but we need to understand who's the biggest earner on the technology. And if we understand that, then we know if it is a technology that is usable for the end customer, because you, me, all the third-party integrators, the CPOs, the energy companies, we all think it's super good. The end consumers, do they think it's good? Will they save money on their energy invoice? That is the last step now, I think, to make this happen, is to realize the business model for it.
I think there's a lot of technologies where the benefit to consumers, although, our focus is selling to companies. This is, yes, you want to be approachable as a brand, but at the same time, we want to be integratable, we want to be installable, we want to play nice with each other, so to speak. When I think always about vehicle to grid, and that it will lead me to my last question to you, but the whole vehicle to grid thing is, I'm still trying to explain dynamic phase balancing to my parents, Where does the average consumer understand what it is? And of course, when is it going to be mass scale? And we're not talking about trial projects. Everyone is talking about V2G, so are we. But ultimately, there's a lot of trial and a lot of projects where it's being tested. But, there's always the argumentation going back and forth. When will all of France, all of Germany, all the Nordics run on vehicle to grid tariffs? And so my question to you is, as a last question for today, when you take the Swedish glasses off and you look outside, and you've been around Europe, and then obviously me included, you speak with a lot of colleagues and you hear their pain points, which are, again, as I said at the beginning, very different obstacles than you face.
Yeah.
What do you think is needed on a European level to actually make that dream of vehicle to grid and many other things a reality?
Thanks for a good last question, man.
Didn't see that one coming, did you?
No, didn't. Was it in the script?
No.
What I think is, we talked about it earlier, but I think the unified standard is one thing, because as of now, people or companies are speculating on the standard, to be frank. We think this is the standard. We think this is how we will do it. So a unified standard is a start. For me, it's also different countries have different approaches on how easy we should make the EV adoption or the energy adoption or the energy transition to more greener energy. So I think it's also to be able to sell more EV cars, for example. V2G could be incentive for people to buy more EV cars, because then you don't just buy an EV car, you buy a resource for your home, for example. So I think countries need to think about the car as more than just a transportation product and more as a resource product for future energy ecosystems. And based on that, they need to create incentives to provide more EV cars on the road. So that will solve the energy problem and have more plannable energy, but it will also solve the green transition. So we will have a bigger chunk of a fleet fossil free. So incentives, and have a clear strategy on how you will use V2G cars and V2G chargers. Maybe you should also create an incentive for V2G chargers as well. Maybe you should exclude the old ones.
Man, if you ever run for any office, you have my vote.
Oh, thanks, man.
So in case that wasn't enough for everyone, they also decided to give us a speaker slot at EVS.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a controversial one internally at Zaptec. It's we call it Confessions of an EV Charger Manufacturer. We're going to speak during this event. I'm really excited to share the stage with you. We're not going to sell anything.
No.
We are going to be very honest as PR approved it. But are you looking forward to our speaking slot?
Yeah, check us out.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.